The chair was still warm when I walked into my own dining room and found another woman sitting in it, wearing my mother-in-law's pearls, drinking from my wedding china, and smiling at me like she had already won. I want you to understand something before I go any further. That chair wasn't just furniture. It was the chair my husband's grandmother, Grandma Ruth, had claimed the very first Thanksgiving I brought her son home to meet the family. She'd looked at me, this nervous 24-year-old girl clutching a store-bought pie because I didn't know how to bake yet, and she'd patted the seat beside her. "Sit here, baby," she'd said. "This is family's chair now." For 11 years, that chair meant something. It meant I belonged. My name is Diane. I was 43 years old the day my whole life came apart at a dinner table, in front of my own family, in my own house. Let me back up. I need you to understand who I was before that night, because the woman I became after is almost a stranger to me now, when I look back on it. I met my husband, Marcus, when I was 23. He was charming in that quiet way, the kind of man who remembered how you took your coffee after only one conversation. We built something together slowly, the way you build a house, brick by brick, year by year. 2 kids, a modest home in a quiet neighborhood outside Charlotte, a life that looked from the outside like something out of a catalog. Stable, ordinary, safe. I gave up a lot for that life. I'd been in nursing school when we met, working towards something that felt like mine. But when our first daughter came early, 3 months early, spending 6 weeks in the NICU with tubes taped to skin that looked too fragile to be real, I stopped going to class. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back once things settled. They never did. There was always another reason to wait. Another mouth to feed, another mortgage payment, another version of not yet. Marcus's grandmother, Ruth, was the one person who never let me forget who I used to be. She used to sit with me in the kitchen on Sunday afternoons, snapping green beans, and she'd actually ask me, what I dreamed about before I became somebody's wife and somebody's mother. Nobody else asked that. Not even Marcus, if I'm honest with myself now. Ruth was 81 years old that year, sharp as a blade still. Her hands shook sometimes, arthritis settling into knuckles that had spent a lifetime working, first as a seamstress, then raising 4 children mostly alone after her husband passed young. She didn't miss much. I used to joke that Ruth could smell a lie from 2 rooms away. I didn't know yet how true that would turn out to be. The trouble, looking back, started small. The way trouble usually does. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in through side doors you didn't even know you'd left open. Marcus had taken a new position at his company that spring, more travel, longer hours, the kind of promotion that comes with a nicer title and a heavier price. I remember being proud of him. I remember telling my sister on the phone, "He worked so hard for this." I meant it. God, I meant it. He started coming home later, missing dinners. There was a stretch of about 6 weeks where he'd walk in around 9, sometimes 10, smelling faintly of restaurant food that wasn't the kind of restaurant food you get from grabbing a sandwich at your desk. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But you learn, when you've been married as long as I had, to file certain observations away in a drawer-marked deal with later. I had 2 teenagers, a part-time job at the pharmacy, and a mother with early-stage dementia I was driving 40 minutes to check on twice a week. Later felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Ruth noticed too. She didn't file things away. That wasn't her nature. "That boy's got something on his conscience," she told me one Sunday, watching Marcus practically inhale his plate and leave for a work call that seemed to require him to take his phone out to the car. "I raised him. I know the look." "He's just stressed, Grandma Ruth," I said. "New job." She looked at me over her glasses, the way she did when she thought I was being willfully blind. She said, just that. But it sat with me for days. I wish I could tell you I confronted him then. I wish I could tell you I was braver sooner. But there's a particular kind of fear that comes with almost knowing something. A fear that if you ask the question out loud, you can't unhear the answer. So I didn't ask. I just watched and waited and told myself I was imagining things, the way you tell yourself the noise in the house at night is just the pipes settling. Her name was Selene. I didn't know that yet that night in September. I only knew she worked in his office, that she was younger, 31, I'd learn later, and that she had the kind of effortless, unbothered beauty that makes other women feel like they're auditioning for their own lives. I found out about her the way most women find out about these things, not through some dramatic discovery, no lipstick on a collar, nothing so cinematic. I found out through a receipt. A hotel receipt, tucked into his jacket pocket when I was doing laundry, dated for a night he'd told me he was in Richmond for a conference. I stood in the laundry room for what felt like an hour, holding that piece of paper, feeling something cold spread through my chest like water finding every crack in a foundation. I didn't cry right away. I remember that clearly. I just stood there, doing math in my head, counting backward through months, matching dates against memories, watching 11 years of my life rearrange itself into a story I hadn't known I was living. I confronted him that night, quietly. I didn't want the kids to hear. I found the receipt, Marcus. He didn't even try to lie, not at first. That almost hurt more. Diane, it's not what you think. Don't, I said. Don't you dare tell me it's not what I think. I'm not stupid. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said the words that I think broke something in me permanently. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened. Things don't just happen. I wanted to scream at him. People make choices. Every single day, for months, you made a choice. But I didn't scream. I never was much of a screamer. I went cold instead and quiet, and I told him I needed time to think. He agreed, almost too easily, like relief at not having to fight about it outweighed any guilt he might have felt. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until weeks later, was that time to think meant something very different to Marcus than it did to me. To me, it meant space to process a betrayal that had cracked my entire understanding of my own life. To him, apparently, it meant an opening. 3 weeks after that laundry room conversation, Marcus told me he'd invited a colleague to family dinner on Sunday. Ruth's dinner. The one tradition in our house that had never once been broken in 11 years, rain or shine, health or sickness. Every Sunday, the whole family gathered at Ruth's insistence, in my dining room, around that table in those chairs. A colleague, I repeated slowly, feeling that cold water spreading again. She's new to the area, Marcus said, not quite meeting my eyes. Doesn't know many people. I thought it would be nice. I should have said no. I know that now. I should have looked him dead in the eye and asked him if he thought I was a fool. But something in me, some exhausted, worn-down part of me that had spent 11 years keeping the peace, just nodded. Fine, I said. Whatever you want. I didn't tell Ruth about the receipt. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my sister. Shame is a strange, illogical thing. I hadn't done anything wrong, and yet I felt it anyway, heavy and suffocating, like betrayal was something you could catch, like a cold. Sunday came. I remember dressing that morning with hands that wouldn't quite stop trembling, telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe I was wrong, that maybe this was truly just a colleague, and I was about to embarrass myself with paranoia. I wanted so badly to be wrong. I was not wrong. She walked through my front door at 6 o'clock in a soft blue dress, confident in a way that made my stomach drop before she'd even said a word. Marcus introduced her with a casualness that felt rehearsed. Diane, this is Selene. Selene, my wife. My wife. He said it so plainly, like it was just a fact, unrelated to anything. Selene smiled at me, a smile with teeth, polished and practiced, and said, It's so nice to finally meet you. Marcus talks about you all the time. I smiled back. I don't know how. Something in me had gone very still and very calm, the way the ocean goes still right before a storm rolls in. We sat down to dinner. My children on one side, chattering about school, oblivious. My mother-in-law across from me. Marcus at the head of the table where he always sat. And Ruth, 81 years old, sharp as glass, missing absolutely nothing, arriving 15 minutes late because her hip had been bothering her, walking in through the dining room door just as everyone was settling into their seats. I watched her stop in the doorway. I watched her eyes move across the table, taking in the new face, the empty chair beside Marcus that should have been mine. Because that's where Selene was sitting, in my chair, the one beside my husband, the one that had been mine for 11 years. Ruth didn't say a word. She just stood there in the doorway for 3 long seconds, her cane gripped tight in one weathered hand, her eyes narrowing in a way I had seen only once before, the day she found out a neighbor had been stealing from the church collection plate. Then she smiled, a small, terrible, knowing smile. "Well," she said, her voice carrying across the room like a blade sliding out of its sheath, "isn't this interesting?" And that was the moment, right there, before anything else happened, before the plates were even passed, that I understood something was about to break wide open, right there at my own dinner table, in front of everyone I loved. Ruth didn't sit down right away. She stood there in the doorway a moment longer, leaning on her cane, and I watched her gaze move slowly from Selini's face, to the chair, to me, and something in that look told me she already understood more than I'd said out loud to anyone. "Grandma Ruth, this is Selini," Marcus said, too quickly, too brightly, the way people talk when they're trying to paper over a silence that's already cracking. "She's new at my office," I thought. "I know who she is," Ruth said, not loudly, just plainly the way you'd state the weather. The table went quiet. My son, 16 and sensing tension the way teenagers do without understanding its shape, glanced up from his plate. My daughter's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Selini's smile flickered, just slightly, like a candle catching a draft. "I'm sorry." Ruth made her way to the table slowly, her cane tapping against the hardwood floor, each step deliberate. She stopped behind the empty chair at the foot of the table. The one that wasn't hers, wasn't mine, wasn't anyone's really, just an extra seat we kept for guests, and she looked at it for a long moment before looking back up at Selini. "That's an interesting seat you've chosen," Ruth said. "I didn't realize seats were assigned," Selini said, and there was an edge underneath the politeness now, thin but present, like a wire beneath silk. "They're not assigned," Ruth said. "They're earned." I felt something in my chest crack open at those words. Earned. 11 years of Sunday dinners, 11 years of learning to cook Marcus's mother's recipes, 11 years of sitting beside my husband in that chair while our children grew up around us, all of it rising up in my throat at once, and I had to look down at my plate to keep from falling apart right there in front of everyone. Marcus cleared his throat. "Grandma, let's just eat, okay? Selini doesn't know anyone here, I just wanted her to feel welcome." "Welcome," Ruth repeated, and she said the word like it tasted bad in her mouth. She turned to me then, and her voice softened, just for a moment, just for me. "Diane, how long have you known?" I hadn't meant to say anything. I'd promised myself, dressing that morning, that I would hold it together, that I would not make a scene, that I would get through this dinner with whatever dignity I had left and deal with the wreckage privately, the way I'd been taught to deal with everything my whole life, quietly, alone, behind closed doors. But something about Ruth asking me directly, in front of everyone, with such gentle certainty that she already knew the answer, it broke the dam. 3 weeks, I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. I found a receipt, a hotel receipt. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever sat inside of. My daughter looked at her father. My son set down his fork entirely. And Marcus just sat there, his face draining of color, his mouth opening and closing like a man trying to find footing on ice that had already given way beneath him. "Diane," he started. "You brought her here," I said, and I was surprised to find that my voice wasn't shaking anymore. It had gone somewhere past shaking, into something colder and clearer. "You brought her into my house. You sat her in my chair, in front of our children." "It's not," Selini started. "I wasn't talking to you," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Ruth set her cane against the table then, and with a steadiness that belied her 81 years, she reached over, picked up the water glass in front of Selini, and set it down on the far side of the table, deliberately, decisively, a small act, but it landed like a verdict. "Get up," Ruth said. "Excuse me." I said get up, out of that chair. Ruth's voice had dropped into a register I'd never heard from her before, not shouting, never shouting, but carrying a weight that filled the entire room. "You will not sit in my granddaughter's chair and eat food she cooked with her own hands while wearing a smile like you've won something. You haven't won anything, sweetheart. You've stepped into a mess that isn't yours to sit inside of. Seleni's composure cracked for the first time all evening. This is absurd. Marcus, are you going to say something? But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something like real fear in his eyes, not fear of losing me, I understood then, but fear of losing the version of himself that got to have both things. The stable life and the exciting one. The wife who kept his home running and the woman who made him feel young again. He'd wanted to keep both, I realized, sitting there. He'd never once planned on choosing. "Everybody out of my house," Marcus finally said, but he was looking at Ruth when he said it, not Selene, like he thought this was somehow his grandmother's doing to fix. "No," Ruth said. "She goes." She pointed one shaking finger at Selene. "You built this mess, Marcus, and you are going to sit in it and look at what you've done to this family because I am not leaving, and Diane is certainly not leaving. This is her house, too." I don't know exactly what happened in me in that moment. Something that had been coiled tight for 3 weeks, maybe for years, if I'm honest, finally loosened. I stood up from my seat. "She's right," I said. "Get out, Selene." Selene looked at Marcus, waiting for him to defend her, to say something, anything. He didn't. He just sat there, staring at the tablecloth like it held answers. And I think that silence told her everything she needed to know about what she actually was to him, not a choice he'd made, but a comfort he'd allowed himself, never intending to give up anything for it. She stood, gathered her purse with hands that weren't quite steady, and walked out without another word. The front door closed behind her, not slammed, just closed, quiet and final. The dinner table sat in silence for a long moment after that. My son finally spoke, in a small voice that broke my heart clean in two. "Mom, are you okay?" I looked at my children, 16 and 14, watching their whole understanding of their family rearrange itself in real time, and I found something in me I didn't know was still there. "I will be," I told them, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I believed it. I want to tell you the rest quickly, because the truth is, the hardest part of this story wasn't that dinner. The hardest part came after, in the quiet. Marcus and I separated 2 months later. Not immediately. I gave myself time, real time, to think clearly instead of just surviving day to day, the way I'd been doing since the laundry room. We tried counseling twice. It didn't take. There's a particular kind of damage that doesn't mend just because both people want it to. Trust, once it's gone, doesn't come back because you miss it. It comes back, if it comes back at all, slowly, through years of proof. And Marcus, I came to understand, wasn't a man capable of that kind of patient rebuilding. He wanted forgiveness handed to him, not earned. We finalized the divorce the following spring. I won't pretend it wasn't devastating. There were nights I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot before my shift, crying until my chest hurt, grieving not just the marriage but the 11 years I'd given it, the nursing degree I never finished, the version of myself I'd set aside to become somebody's wife. But something Ruth said to me, weeks after that dinner, stayed with me through all of it. We were sitting in her kitchen, the two of us, snapping green beans the way we always had. "You know why I moved that water glass?" she asked me. I shook my head. "Because that seat isn't about a chair, baby. It's about who a family chooses to protect. And I chose you the day you walked in nervous with that store-bought pie because I saw a girl who was willing to try. Selene never had to try for anything in that room. She just walked in and took." I finished my nursing degree 18 months later, at the age of 45, sitting in classrooms with kids half my age, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. I passed my boards on the second attempt. I work now in a pediatric unit, and some days, holding a frightened child's hand while their parents wait outside, I think about how strange it is that the worst night of my life became the hinge that opened a door I thought had closed for good. Ruth passed away 2 years after that dinner, peacefully, in her sleep, at 83. At her funeral, my daughter told me something I didn't know, that Ruth had pulled her aside once, not long before she died, and told her, "Your mother is the strongest woman I ever met. Don't you let anybody tell you otherwise, especially not her." I think about that chair sometimes. Not with anger anymore, that faded, eventually, the way most anger does if you let it. I think about it as the place where I finally stopped being quiet, where an 81-year-old woman with a cane and a lifetime of hard-won wisdom looked at a table full of people pretending everything was fine and decided that pretending was over. Family isn't the people who show up when everything is easy. It's the people who stand in the doorway, see exactly what's wrong, and refuse to let you sit alone in it. I sit in that chair every Sunday now. My children sit beside me. And some evenings when the house is quiet and dinner is done, I swear I can still hear Ruth's voice, steady and certain, the way it was that night. Get up out of that chair. It wasn't just an order. It was a woman teaching me, one final time, exactly what I was worth.